Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And tonight I wanted to continue our conversation about the ancestors. And we have a question from Greengate 777, who wishes me to elaborate upon the idea, which we explored in our last vlog, that in order for learning to occur in the other world, the door must first be opened in this physical incarnation. And particularly to relate this idea to ideas of right and wrong, good and bad, justice and suffering. And of course, we've talked about suffering in these vlogs before, and as you know, it can be quite a complex subject. But in answer to Greengate's question, what I would mainly say is that in other religions, certain other religions, this life is thought of as being a preparatory period for an eternal afterlife where the real growth and transition ends. As a Corellian, that's not at all how I think about it. My understanding is that this life is vitally important in a reciprocal way with the other world. Just as God and Goddess have a reciprocal relationship, just as yin and yang have a reciprocal relationship, just as both are equal but neither is complete without the other, so too, this physical life and our spiritual life have a reciprocal relationship. And the things that happen in the physical life absolutely affect the spiritual life and move it forward. This life, this physical incarnation, acts as a catalyst for our soul, allowing change and transformation. From that point of view, everything that happens in this life, whether we think of it as being pleasant or unpleasant, good or bad, etc., is an important catalyst for the soul. Every experience can open a door for the soul, which otherwise might not open. And some of the experiences we think of as being negative, from the point of view of the transformation they allow for the soul, can be very positive. Because the point of view of the soul is different from our own. And because of this, because the door must be opened here for learning to occur either in this world or the next, all experiences are valuable and all experiences are good. Whether they appear to be that way from the moment of that experience or not is another matter. But from the point of view of the soul, all experiences are good, because they're all learning, they're all growing. Now, how does this affect our ideas of right and wrong? Well, to be honest, our ideas of right and wrong are effectively situational and are based on the idea of social contract. Things that we today in our modern culture consider right and wrong are very different from what people might have considered right or wrong in many cases 1,000 years ago, or even more, 3,000 years ago. Our attitudes of what is right and wrong evolve and change and have everything to do with our social contract, or our agreement among each other of what we require to live in peace with each other. In certain other religions, there is an attempt to project the social contract that we live by onto deity, and to try to say that our momentary values are eternal in nature. And from a Corellian point of view, I would reject this idea. And I would say that our momentary values have to do with this life, this culture, this time, but the eternal view of spirit is somewhat beyond all these things. You know, this reminds one of the criticism that was raised in the First World War toward the Christian religion, because there were all kinds of movies in the new moving picture industry, movie reels showing the priesthood blessing the army of Imperial Russia, and the army of Great Britain, and also blessing the German Imperial Army. And all these priesthoods claimed to represent basically the same religion, and insisted that God was on the side of their country only, when obviously that was not the case, particularly in the terms of how the war ended. God was not involved in the war per se at all. It was a human war. It was a human thing. And whatever was considered right or wrong in that war had to do with the culture that was fighting it, and the perspective of the individuals. And even looking back from today, which is less than 100 years away, Our attitudes toward what was right and what was wrong in that war do not go along with what the people of the time thought, because we look at many things differently, particularly colonialism. Because at the time, most of the colonial powers had no problem with that idea. Racialism was not considered wrong at the time. Our ideas of what is right and wrong have evolved. So similarly, when we look at what is good or bad in our lives, we're looking at it from the moment of our lives, from the perspective that we are at that moment. But if our soul, which is eternal, looks at that same moment, it may see it differently. Similarly, when our soul looks at the First World War, the example I've used, it would see it differently than the people who are fighting in it at that moment, because it is looking at it from a different perspective and a much greater distance, just as we ourselves now look at it from a much greater distance. What this means, and of course, a vlog is a very, very short period to comment on any such idea, but what this means basically is that there is a big difference between discussing what is right and wrong in society, what is good and bad in society, what we might consider good or bad in our lives, versus what is good or bad in the universe. The perspective is drastically different, and in our religion, we talk about God being like a diamond, one stone with many facets. And for most pagans, those facets are anthropomorphized. What that means is that we tend to view God in human terms. But we also know that whatever facet of God we may be looking at, whatever god, goddess, deity we are looking at, though we may picture it as human, it is much more than that. And we make a mistake in thinking that God is thinking from the exact same viewpoint we are. We make a mistake in thinking that our own soul, which encompasses many lifetimes, even many different probabilities, would be looking at these circumstances from exactly the same point as our conscious mind. The viewpoints are in fact very different. So, I think that probably is all the time we have for tonight, and perhaps I'll continue this thought again tomorrow night or thereafter, because it has an awful lot involved in it. But this is my basic answer to Greengate's question. I hope that you find it helpful, and we will elaborate upon it further in a future vlog. Until then, may you blessed be.